People fall into a trap of business is business is business, where they think, oh, well, if I know how to run a manufacturing company, I could probably run a day spa. They're different businesses. So for me, that would be like the number one finding is business is not business is business. There are commonalities across businesses, but there are also large differentiators. Um, but in looking at a lot of businesses, I would say there's kind of four things that for me, I look at when I'm identifying whether or not a business looks good or bad. And these are industry agnostic. The first thing is, why is the owner selling? I want to know they're selling, right? Many times you'll talk to an owner and it's like, well, they want to explore other opportunities. Okay, well, tell me about the other opportunities. I want to know about those. Like, why would a seller leave a business that's absentee to go pursue another opportunity? And so that's always number one. Why is the seller selling? I think that story is really important. Number two, what is the seller doing in that business? Most of the businesses that I'm looking at are sub $10 million. And sub $10 million is a subscale business. What that means is I'm effectively buying a job. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just is what it is. It needs someone to be operating that business as the owner operator. And so what is the entrepreneur who's selling that business? What are they doing? I want to understand how much time are they spending in the business? Do my skill sets match their skill sets? Do I understand how they get from A to B? Uh, number three, I want to know whether or not that the business has like, for lack of a better word, SOPs. Does it can it sustain without the owner? I'm not saying that the owner's fully absentee, but if I take a vacation or if I'm gone for a couple of weeks, can it sustain? Are there processes in place that would allow this business to scale? And then the last thing, and this is like very important to me, how clean are the financials? Are we looking at like something scrawled on the back of a napkin? Are these audited financials? Do I have access to them? Do they make sense? Do I have bank statements? How clean are these financials? So those are really like the most important thing. Why is the seller selling? What do they do in the business? How dependent are they on the business? Do they have systems and processes? And then lastly, are the financials clean? And that applies to broadly any business that I'm looking at in any industry. Once that is looked at, then I can like drill down into industry specific or business specific things that I'm interested in, but that's where I start.
Yeah, and the story about why they're selling, to your point, it's a weird balance because if you say, "Oh, I want to pursue other opportunities," to your point, well, hold on, I thought this was a good deal. What do you mean? There's something
Yeah.
better? If you're a buyer, like what's better out there? And so you
Yeah.
have to kind of thread that. But age also plays in that too, right? If you're, 72, you're ready to hang it up, right?
Sure.
If you're gonna make $50 million, it's bigger than what you mentioned. It's a different
Hmm.
mindset, right? Because you can say, I'm gonna retire. And so what the monetary back end ties into the motivation potentially, if it's to pursue other opportunities, then there is some question about, well, what's wrong with this? Is it the team? Is it the cash flow cycles? There's a lot of stuff that could be causing frustration
Yeah.
here that make that
Yeah.
make
Have you?
that make go ahead.
There's a phrase in investing where it's like you don't want to catch a falling knife. Have you ever heard that
Yep.
phrase?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's basically like, oh, that looks good. I'll try to catch this knife, and you get cut. That's
Yeah. Right.
Warren Buffett has a famous quote that says, um, when a good operator meets a bad business, the bad business is the only one that comes out with their reputation intact. And so it's like you want to understand whether or not the seller is offloading something that's a problem, or if they truly have good reasons for selling the business. The reason could be any reason in the world. You just have to get comfortable with, okay, why are they getting rid of it? Because if they're just trying to offload a problem, now you've got the problem, and that's you don't want to be walking into that situation.
Which kind of ties into what are they doing in the business, right? Because if they're constantly putting out every little fire that comes in, they're constantly working on stuff like that, then they are. You're like, well, I get why you're selling because everything's coming to you. And so when you say what are they doing in the business, what do you hope to find that they're doing, and hope to find that they're not doing?
It's a great question. It depends on the size and the scale. If it's a sub-$1 million business, I'm assuming that they're doing um, one of like three key things, probably two key things. Number one, they're either the sales engine, or number two, they're the fulfillment engine, or number three, they're doing both, right? Those are like the two options are either you're doing sales or you're actually fulfilling the product. And when you're sub a million, that's probably what the seller is doing. So I would just want to understand if I'm buying a sub $1 million business and the seller's main strength is lead gen, marketing, business development, I need to know that because maybe I suck at those things. Then I shouldn't buy that business because that's going to require that skill set of me, right? Past $1 million in revenue, and I'm using revenue numbers. I know it's different, right? Like we could use employee size, or number of employees. We could use profit, whatever. These are just like broad categories. From a million to say $3 million, that's the phase where they're transitioning from an active owner operator where they're doing everything in the business to now they've got some managers on their team. So if it's like the million to $3 million range, I'm looking for, is there a COO type? They may not be called the COO, but business office manager, operations manager, ops director, whatever that is. Do they have a sales manager? Do they have some depth to the bench? And then past $3 million, let's say $3 to $7 million, I'm looking at the owner should be the CEO, and then they've got a team that's really built out, focused on finance, business development, operations, and quality. Like they've got to have at least those four pieces on their team. So when you ask me what I'm looking for, I'm looking at the size of the business, and then I'm like, okay, what should the owner be doing? Hopefully, they're not when they're at like the $5 million mark. Hopefully, they're not the director of business development and the director of operations and the director of human resources, right? Like hopefully by that point they've got a team built out. Otherwise, I don't want to either I'm going to pay less for that business or I just don't want that business, period, because it's too much for me to try to figure out.
Yeah, and on the sales, one thing comes to mind is a lot of companies can have a customer concentration issue. And so if the owner is the lead gen person and you have customer concentration issues, then all of a sudden removing that owner is even bigger because now you've got, 15, 20 clients or whatever it is. And the owner is the person who has all those deep relationships with them. And it's like, oh, okay, well,
Yep.
that's a real big risk from a buyer standpoint. And so, um,
Yeah. I bought a business. My first business that I bought was a medical billing company. It was doing about $5 million in revenue. On paper, it was doing $500,000 a year in profit. I thought it was doing more, but the bank only underwrote to 500,000. Well, the seller wasn't hiding anything, but it just was messy. Once we got in there, we realized there's a huge customer concentration. Over 50% of their revenue came from one customer. We had thought it was about 20%, but it turned out to be 50%. But even when we thought it was 20%, we said, okay, let's do a seller note and we'll do 30% of the purchase price is the seller note. And the seller note is forgivable if that customer leaves over the next 3 years. Now there was tiers to it, right? Because at some point it's your responsibility. It's not the seller's responsibility. So it's like year one, it was actually in months, but I'm just going to do it easily. In year one, if that customer left, 50% of the note was forgiven. In year two, if the customer left, 30% of the note was forgiven. In year three, if the customer left, 10% of the note was forgiven. So it's like the seller had an incentive to make sure that that customer relationship stayed intact. And if you're selling a business, you just have to be aware that, okay, if there's customer concentration, I'm probably going to have to stay on in some capacity, or I'm going to have to sweeten the pot in some way in order to get the buyer comfortable with taking on the risk of that concentration.
yeah, and you said earlier, I think, talking about the big company you're at, negotiation, and that's I've heard I don't know how sellers like bring me an offer and I'll sell. It's like no, 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 no. That's not. It's not a car. It's not a house. It's not how this
Yeah, yeah,
works. There's so many factors that you know. If you say, well, I'm not good at sales, then there's going to be some negotiation around some of the stuff because that could be a big concern. If you're
yeah.
great at sales, it's a less of a concern. And so negotiation as you're going through this stuff, it keeps coming back to my mind because you have to be willing to negotiate and understand that the new buyer, the new owner, they have strengths and weaknesses like we all do. And so, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, you got it's not personal, but there are risks. And the business usually at these sizes that you're mentioning is usually built around the owner's strengths, right? And so if you're great at sales, but you're terrible
Mhm.
at fulfillment, then the company might be great at sales, but not very good at fulfillment. And then the new buyer might be good at fulfillment, but not good at sales. And so now all of a sudden you're going, this makes a lot of sense. But to them, it just does it because the risks are a lot more apparent to, or obvious, rather, I should say, to them. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I think gets lost in this conversation at times.
Yeah, I think too. I've sold multiple businesses. I've had two fairly large. There were seven-figure exits, eight-figure exits, and a lot of times we spend a lot of time on what is like as a seller, right? Oh, I hope they pick me. I hope they like me. I'm only going to show certain information so that I don't scare them off. But the truth is, you want to be selective with who buys your company. That doesn't mean that money isn't still green. Like money is money, but at the same time, you need to understand who would you possibly sell to. Do you want to sell to private equity? It's going to be top dollar. That's a different way to prep than if you want to sell to a strategic buyer who may not pay as much, but maybe they let you roll some equity and you have upside in the mothership when they acquire you. So as a seller, like you need to be clear on what are you looking for upon exit? What's going to make somebody else successful? Especially because, like I said, for most businesses at $10 million or below, there's going to be a seller note component most of the time. There's going to be some type of a seller carry. And in order for the seller carry to pay out, they've got to be successful. So you need to think about setting up a buyer to be as successful as possible.